My speech is titled Thanks, Grandpa, and it's my small way of paying tribute to my grandfather, who is now in heaven. This man had the single largest impact on my life, more so than anyone I've ever known or met since. His name was Clarence Buford Murkerson. They called him CB for short. He unknowingly taught me so many things that it's hard to know where to begin. I guess the thing that I remember the most about my grandfather is that once he committed to something, he sold out to it completely. He stayed true to that commitment. This was true in his marriage, it was true in his conversion to Christianity, and it was certainly true in the ideals and morals that he demanded not only of himself, but also of his children. My earliest memories of my grandfather, who I simply called Grandpa, was attending the small country church located next door to his home in Cairo, Georgia. It didn't matter whether he had 10 people in attendance or a church full, he was always ready to preach the gospel. He had gotten saved when he was 42 years old and was fond of telling the story that he had asked God to grant him as many years preaching the gospel as he had been a sinner. God would honor that request. For years he would preach at his church and then would drive each week to Bainbridge, Georgia to preach a midweek service. When he became a pastor, he sold out completely to being a Christian. So much so that when he would almost cut off his ear years later, he would refuse to take any medication once the doctor had stitched things back together. By the way, the doctor was amazed a week or so later when he removed the stitches only to discover that my grandfather's ear had almost healed completely. Grandpa also taught me what it was like to be committed to your marriage and, more importantly, to your wife. Although you might have heard my grandparents half-heartedly bickering at each other from time to time, you knew that at the end of the day he had her back and she had his. They were absolutely inseparable and wore out many tires on automobiles traveling around to various churches to preach the gospel. To this day, I still remember the level of commitment that he shared with his wife, and he has become a vital part of the way I look at my marriage and my wife. When my grandfather said, "Till death do us part," he meant it without reservation. I was also greatly impressed with the morality of this man that I was blessed to know during the early years of my life. You simply knew where he stood, and he would feel the same way at the end of the day, or the next year, or even the next decade for that matter. He had a steadfastness that I have seldom seen. Because of this, even his co-workers, who were far from calling themselves Christians, would watch their language and their actions in front of him. They respected him, and they would affectionately refer to him as Rev. These are just a few of the qualities that come to my mind whenever I look back at my younger days. The days when I could walk up to my grandfather as a young child and know that he always had a nickel or a quarter in his pocket just for me. Sometimes I catch myself yearning for those days and fight back tears at not being able to make the 30-minute drive to Cairo to tell him and Grandma, "I love you." I know that many of the blessings in my life today are a direct result of God honoring the life of C.B. Murkerson. For that, I am and always will be eternally grateful. Thank you, Grandpa. Save me a place in heaven next to you and Grandma.